Okay, so we've got this kind of interesting situation brewing in the NBA world, right?
Yeah.
LeBron James, you know, arguably the biggest name in basketball. You can't really get bigger than LeBron, right?
Yeah, right.
He goes on the Pat McAfee show, and he just throws this curveball. He calls out this veteran NBA reporter, Brian Windhorst,
Mm.
and then just when you think it couldn't get any spicier, Lakers coach J.J. Redick's name gets dropped into the mix.
Oh, wow.
You sent me this Clutch Points article that really digs into all this, and
Yeah.
what we really want to figure out is, what's the story here?
Yeah.
What's the dynamic between these three guys, especially when you consider their past and how everything's kind of intertwined?
Right.
Let's break it down. Let's look at these different angles.
Yeah, you know what I find super interesting about this whole thing is that it all started with this kind of personal comment from LeBron.
Right.
But it could actually tell us a lot about the relationship between athletes and the journalists who cover them. It's not just about some feud or drama. It's like a glimpse behind the curtain of how these narratives get shaped and how everyone sees them.
Exactly.
Right.
And the spark that ignited all this was LeBron's appearance on McAfee's show.
Right.
He didn't hold back at all when talking about Brian Windhorst,
Yeah.
calling him weird, and straight up saying that Windhorst was never his best friend.
Yeah.
It was so blunt.
It was.
No way you could misinterpret that.
Nope, not at all. And for someone like LeBron to be that direct, that's going to turn heads. It makes you think what was going through his mind. Why did he feel the need to say that so publicly?
And the media world reacted pretty quickly, too.
Oh, yeah.
Windhorst's colleague Tim McMahon came to his defense almost immediately on the Hoop Collective podcast. He was like, hold on, I've never even heard Windhorst claim to be LeBron's best friend.
It's interesting how the media often circles the wagons when one of their own is criticized.
Right. It's like this automatic instinct to jump in and defend or clarify things.
Totally.
And here's where J.J. Redick comes into the picture. McMahon brings him up and points out that LeBron's obviously spending a lot of time with Redick now that he's coaching the Lakers. It almost sounded like he was implying that LeBron's idea of close is based on who he interacts with on a daily basis now.
That's a really sharp observation. I think McMahon is suggesting that LeBron's inner circle is kind of fluid, you know? It changes based on his current situation in his career.
Right.
Which makes you think, how much do past relationships even matter in pro sports when the stakes are so high?
Right. Then McMahon takes it a step further and suggests that maybe LeBron's issue isn't even about the best friend label at all.
Yeah.
Maybe it's about Windhorst's reporting over the years.
Interesting.
McMahon's saying that Windhorst has always been honest in his coverage, even if it wasn't always flattering towards LeBron. He even quotes Windhorst saying on Redick's podcast, I don't think LeBron James likes me.
Wow. That's a pretty big statement to make.
It is. It really highlights the tightrope that sports journalists have to walk.
Yeah.
Do they try to stay in the good graces of the athletes they cover? Or do they prioritize giving unbiased analysis, even if it ruffles some feathers?
Right. Do you prioritize being liked, or do you prioritize telling the truth even when it's hard to hear?
Exactly. And it's even more interesting when you factor in the history between LeBron and Windhorst. These guys go way back.
Really?
They both graduated from the same high school in Akron, Ohio, St. Vincent St. Mary.
No kidding.
Windhorst was a few years ahead of LeBron, but they were both there. And Windhorst actually started covering LeBron when he was this phenom in high school for the local papers.
So he's seen it all. He's had a front row seat to LeBron's entire journey.
He really has.
Yeah.
From high school star to global icon, and their careers have basically run parallel to each other.
Yeah.
Windhorst covered LeBron's first stint with the Cavaliers. Then he joined ESPN to cover him in Miami. Then he followed him back to Cleveland and eventually to the Lakers.
Wow. So for over 2 decades, Windhorst has been reporting on LeBron's every move.
Yeah, think about that. That's a lot of wins, losses, trades, drama, free agency, everything.
It's almost impossible to imagine that there wouldn't be some disagreements or different interpretations of events over such a long period.
Right. And speaking of disagreements,
Uh-huh.
the Clutch Points article brings up this one time where Windhorst claimed that LeBron initially signed with Nike because he idolized Michael Jordan.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
LeBron shut that down pretty hard.
He did.
He said very clearly that he signed with Nike for the massive contract, $90 million over 7 years,
Wow.
which honestly is pretty hard to turn down.
Yeah.
And he said it allowed him to give his mom a better life and that he just genuinely likes wearing Nikes.
Huh.
It seemed like he felt Windhorst was way off base about his motivations.
That's a perfect example of how narratives can get twisted. You have the reporter's interpretation, and then you have the athlete's actual lived experience, and sometimes those two things don't line up.
Yeah. And it's worth mentioning that the guy who wrote this Clutch Points piece, Preston Byers,
Yeah.
he's got a pretty impressive resume. He's covered the NBA, the NFL college football. He's written for a bunch of different sports publications. So he's not just some random blogger. He's a seasoned sports journalist who's looking at this whole thing from within the media world.
That definitely adds another layer to the story.
It does. So to sum it all up, this beef, and maybe beef is too strong of a word,
Right.
but this whole thing started with LeBron publicly questioning Windhorst's closeness to him. Then it evolved into this bigger conversation about the role of honest sports reporting. And then we even revisited some of LeBron's early career decisions with J.J. Redick's new coaching gig, with the Lakers kind of getting thrown in there as a side note.
It's wild how it all came together. On one hand, you have LeBron using his platform to push back against a narrative he doesn't agree with. And on the other hand, you have the media coming to the defense of one of their own and suggesting that maybe the real tension stems from a commitment to unbiased reporting, even when it's critical of a superstar. And then you have Redick in the background highlighting how LeBron's relationships are always evolving.
It really makes you think about the challenges of sports journalism.
Yeah.
How much should personal relationships influence the way reporters cover athletes? And how do athletes who are constantly under the microscope feel about the stories that are being told about them, especially by those who have followed their careers for years?
It's complicated. There are so many layers to unpack here.
There really are.
It makes me think in this age of social media where athletes have more control over their own narratives than ever before, what does that mean for the future of sports journalism?
That's a good question.
How will these changing dynamics continue to shape the way athletes and the media interact? We've seen it play out with LeBron and Windhorst, and now even Redick is part of the conversation. It's definitely something to keep an eye on.
Definitely. It's going to be fascinating to see how it all unfolds.
Absolutely.
All right, well, that was a great breakdown. Thanks for bringing that article to my attention. It's a really interesting deep dive.
My pleasure. Always happy to chat about this stuff.
All right, we'll catch you next time.
Sounds good.
Take care.
You too.